What I'm about to show you today is the world's largest and most important dataset in tech recruiting that has been released in years. We basically went on and surveyed more than 4,000 software engineers from all over the world, from different seniority levels and different tech stacks, to deliver you the best insights about how you can hire them more efficiently. Now, if you're hiring engineers, this video is for you. What we aim to deliver here is real data-driven insights about what works and what doesn't work when you're trying to hire developers online. Now, let's dive into the results. The first insight says the following: LinkedIn profiles only show current skills accurately when users are job hunting. Otherwise, they are outdated. I think this already kind of like busts a myth that the data on LinkedIn is up to date. But as a matter of fact, it's only up to date for people who are actively seeking. Now, the thing about people who are actively seeking is that you probably got their application one way or another through job boards. What you actually want to hire oftentimes is the passive talent who currently doesn't apply. They work somewhere, they're happy, and you want to take them out of their current workplace before they hit the market, before the competition starts. Because the best candidates, when they start looking, everyone's going to give them offers. And that is very difficult to identify using the data on LinkedIn. The second insight says the following: most developers feel LinkedIn fails to show where they're headed, only past achievements. I think this is probably obvious, like we've probably felt that ourselves, but here there's some sort of like validation of that. LinkedIn profiles only focus on like static CV information. It doesn't give us the full story about the candidate, which is so important, especially nowadays with AI and everything that's happening. It doesn't tell us what they're actually passionate about. It doesn't tell us where they're headed. It could be a person who's been a full stack engineer for 5-6 years and now they want to become AI engineers. LinkedIn wouldn't tell us this story. Next, GitHub and real projects are the strongest signal of skill. LinkedIn lags far behind. I think this is probably like already known at this point. It's just that there's no place to gather real meaningful skill data about developers and what they actually know. So if you're relying your outreach only on LinkedIn, you've probably been doing something wrong, because the skills and the past history and achievements over there reflect only a small part about what developers do. And keep in mind something very important. Developers live in depth and in details in their day-to-day job. And if you don't rely on a platform that gives you that depth, you're in disadvantage when you're trying to hire them. Now, something interesting about the people we surveyed: passive candidates represent half of the candidate developer pool, but the problem is worse for senior roles, where only 3 out of 8 candidates are actively looking. So I think this says something very important about the data presented here. What we actually see here is a lot of data from people who are passive talent. And those are the exact same people your team is trying to hire probably right now. And those are the people that would make the greatest hires for your team. So this is why this data set matters. Now, LinkedIn is a great way to reach active seekers. I think that's probably kind of like the biggest myth here, is that LinkedIn tries to give you this illusion that you can reach everyone. But as a matter of fact, the biggest bottleneck in technical recruiting, and specifically in sourcing, was never finding the right profiles, is to get them to reply. And based on the data you see here, most people who are currently active on LinkedIn, in other words, the people who are there to even see your message, are people who are anyway actively looking for a job. So the people that sometimes are the best fit for your opening is not even there to see your job. So sometimes you're competing for attention, and sometimes the attention is just not there. So if you're trying to hire mostly passive talent on LinkedIn, that is probably one of the most difficult jobs to do nowadays, because you at best have a couple of minutes per month to get that developer's attention. And keep in mind that you're trying to hire in a very noisy environment where there's thousands of recruiters that are basically spamming people's inboxes and DMs with different outreach. When we asked about the sentiment of developers and what they feel about LinkedIn, I think the conclusion is fairly simple. Developers don't trust LinkedIn. Developers wouldn't miss LinkedIn that much, and satisfaction is low outside active search periods. That means that people are using LinkedIn kind of like as a jump to find their next step. But I think that mostly applies to people who are anyway actively seeking a job, because people who are passive and they're actually great, they would get hired instantly. Like, they don't need LinkedIn. They don't need anything like that. They would just tweet something or post something that they're open for a new adventure, and there's going to be a gazillion recruiters trying to hire them. On the opposite, Daily Dev has a much higher satisfaction score than LinkedIn, and many developers would be greatly disappointed if daily dev matters. Now that makes sense because daily dev is the professional network that it was built especially for engineers. That's the largest and most active developer network out there in the world. Like, this is the place where developers come to learn, to grow, and to meet other like-minded domain experts. And now this year, we've also entered recruiting, which means that if you're hiring engineers, you can do that in a place where they actually trust. Now, this part is obvious, but it's kind of sad because the trust in cold outreach, or the trust in recruiters in general, has reached an all-time low. And this is especially true in North America and in Europe. So that means when you're trying to send a message to an engineer, you're not starting from neutral. You're actually starting from negative, which is what we call the trust deficit. Now, this is the part where it gets really interesting, because even personalized recruiter messages are often suspected of being AI-generated or templated. Now, in the past, great recruiters were able to articulate themselves in a way that would give the candidate a sense that they've actually researched them and that they know who they are and what they're looking for. Nowadays, that has been fully commoditized. Whether it's real personalization or fake personalization, it doesn't matter. From the developer point of view, every message they get is almost by design was generated by AI or by some sort of automation. And that puts us in a disadvantage. It means that we need to come up with new techniques and new tools in order to be able to actually attract those people. Now, the next insight kind of like complements what we've already talked about, but it gives us a little bit more depth and more detail. So generic spam, irrelevant roles, and missing salary info are the top reasons recruiter messages get ignored. And that means that if you put slightly more transparency into your outreach, saying like, what is the tech stack? What's the work model? What's the salary range? Those things would already get you in the top percentile above any other recruiter message out there. Now, developers generally just don't feel recruiters value their time. Again, I think this is sad, and I don't think that recruiters are doing that intentionally. It's just like in every industry, there's a lot of mediocre players that think that they would be able to hack recruiting by just using more automation and more outreach. And what that eventually creates is a net loss for everyone, because now developers are getting bombarded with so many messages that even the greatest messages doesn't seem to surface well. So we don't want to just talk about what's broken and what's wrong. I want to give you some practical tools and tips as to what could make a difference. So I think the main kind of like point, since we're talking about an environment where trust barely exists, that developers really urge recruiters to know the stack, respect time, and match real role needs. And yet a lot of recruiters do not do it. So if you're going to be doing it, you're going to be in the top percentile of recruiters. So this is it for today. And if you're interested in learning what it looks like to hire in a trust-first environment, I strongly urge you to check out Daily Dev Recruiter. This is the first ever platform that was designed to make technical recruiting work right. And what we've done differently than any other platform is that we actually put trust and respect at the core of everything that happens in the recruiting process between recruiters and developers. And what you get when you're using Daily Dev Recruiter is not yet another recruiting tool. This is a totally new channel. So if you've been using mostly email and LinkedIn, that's going to be a new channel that you've never been exposed to. And what's unique about this channel is that this is the place where developers actually are. So the Daily Dev is a place where developers are using daily, and you can come here and hire them without the hassle and to kind of like borrow the trust of the platform in order to reach the kind of talent that would just not answer anywhere else.